Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. I'm your host, Mari Riesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all backgrounds, ages, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with Laine Hilton. He's an introspective influencer and author. Please enjoy Laine Hilton. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. Today, I am chatting with Laine Hilton, author and introspective influencer. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, good Lord, Mari. Thank you so much for having me on. I truly appreciate this opportunity. I have been somebody that has been into exposure for the majority of my life. So any exposure that I can get now in this realm, I'm more than happy to take. So thank you so much for allowing me to be able to be a little creative on your podcast today, because I love being creative.
You are so welcome. I love being creative too, and I cannot wait to chat more about all of your creative endeavors and how you arrived here today. But before we get into our creativity questions, if you could take a couple of minutes and let our listeners know a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So at this particular moment, I'm an author, a first-time author, quite frankly. But that being said, the only reason why I'm a first-time author is because it took so long for me to actually put this book together. And this book is, quite frankly, something that, this is where I'm at present tense. Like my goal is to not only use my book as a launch pad, but to be able to really work, to be able to really solve a lot of problems for a lot of people that really struggled with a lot of the same pains and pitfalls that I went through in my former life. So I had to go back to my former life to write this book. And that's a weird process when you have to go back 25, 30 years and really look at these pivotal moments in your life. And I personally had one of the more interesting and creative former careers that really is something that, quite frankly, in my eyes, is a foregone industry that is a little bit misunderstood. And what I mean by that is that people really don't know the reality between the difference of being a male exotic dancer in Canada and the US. And I spent 25 years of my life as a male exotic dancer from the age of 17 while I was underage in high school. And I live in Canada, so the drinking age is 19 here. But I was 17 working in this environment and retired at the age of 43. So I went for 25 years in this insane industry. And when you want to talk some creativity, holy cow, like you're like literally forced to be creative because, but I don't live in the past. Quite frankly, I really found out my value that I didn't even think I had was really my past is a derivative of that value. My past actually is something that made me really realize that, I had a lot of stories, but those stories are great for entertainment. But what was the background? Like, what was the I guess you could say the values that were being compromised in those stories that people could take a lesson from, and I had to pinpoint those things, right? So what started off for me as a book called Take It Off: Revelations of a Male Exotic Dancer 5 years ago, when I started writing this thing, that morphed into, in this last 2 years, a deep introspection. It was like, and that's why I'm an introspective influencer now, because I had to face some brutal realities about myself and stop pointing the finger at everybody else and saying blame game, and start using the thumb a little bit and saying, you know what, maybe I was at least 50% accountable for that stuff that happened back then. And when I did that, that liberated me. That opened up the door and made me go, hey, you know what? It happened. That stuff happened. Learn from it, move on, heal the wounds from the past, liberate yourself so you can be the best version of yourself from here forward. Now, do I have bad days? Yes, I have bad days. Life is life. It's the way it works. Not every day is on top of the mountain, It's not the top of the world every day. But when it is the bottom and it's a crappy day when I wake up, I also now realize, due to that introspection, that saboteur that's in my head saying I can't is just a saboteur. go and get out in nature and look around a little bit and actually just get detach from everything and get back to what you need to do in that day. Because you could be the greatest. It's not being the greatest of all time to me. It's actually just being the best version that I can be on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis from here forward. So that's in a nutshell kind of where I'm at.
I love it. And great reminders woven in that. I think it's really helpful to those little reminders of when we wake up having a bad day and we hear the, the narrative or the tape going around in our mind of I can't, I shouldn't, I'm not good enough, whatever it is, recognizing that's what's going on, taking that step back, going and getting outside, doing something else, distracting ourselves. Great way to let that tape go.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's not the first time you've heard it. I mean, there's a lot of other people out there that say exactly that. I really like, look, I'm not sitting here that I have the solution for every single person's problem in this world. That's not what I'm saying. I just have my perspective that applies to a particular demographic of people. And the other demographic, quite frankly, might be very entertained by what I have to offer, but they might not even care about the rest of it, the personal development side. And that's perfectly okay with me. I'm not here to satisfy everybody. But if it's entertaining, hey, I've been doing that for most of my life. So let's roll with some entertainment. I'm cool with that.
Excellent. Well, let's dive into some creativity. And what does it mean to you to be creative?
I love it. Well, first off, creativity is one of my values. It's one of my biggest values. And when I went through this writing process, and I do refer a lot to that because quite frankly, it's not just about pitching my book, but it's actually been such an incredible learning experience since I started this. And so my learning experience, especially when it came to creativity, is I realized that it was actually kind of the catalyst of my divorce, believe it or not. And that's crazy. It really is. But I learned that in this last year and a half, and I've been divorced for 15 years and I never realized it in those last couple of years. And what I mean by that is this. Okay. So, when you get together with somebody and it's that honeymoon stage and you're just like, you could do no wrong. You come out and it's just like, everything's love, 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 love. And you're just like in it. And you can even take another person's, I guess you could say, bad habits and everything else. And you're okay with it because it's just that great. But then the reality sets in, the honeymoon phase is over. And then all of a sudden you start making some incremental changes in one direction. Your partner starts making some incremental changes in another direction, maybe at a different pace, whatever it is. And you start to stretch apart. There's a reason why they call it the 7-year itch from back in the day, because it is that 7-year gap where things kind of change. And if you don't go with it, it kind of happens. Well, what happened to me was 3/4 of the way through my marriage of 8 years, my creativity fell off because I left my dance review that I was working in, and I was working for the largest beach club in North America down in Florida. I had this really insane status-driven lifestyle. Everybody wanted a piece of me, but nobody really wanted to know me, right? So I was kind of swallowed up in this crazy environment of partying and just all the stuff that stereotypically comes with the male dance industry. I was right in there. But I also had this deep love for my creative side, being a dancer. And when that actually got pulled away from me and I went into something that I didn't like anymore and I wasn't inspired and I didn't have it, part of me started to die. And when that part of me started to die, my relationship started to die. And quite frankly, my ex-wife loved my creativity. And that's the funny thing is that a lot of people would think, and I've heard this literally from strangers where they've said, oh, you're a male exotic dancer traveling around all over the place. How did your wife like that? I mean, how could she deal with something like that? And I thought to myself, funny you say. She actually dealt with it very well because I made her feel really, really comfortable in that situation. I, in fact, never really screwed up in the whole 8 years that I was married, whereas my rest of my guys were doing all sorts of crazy stuff. I was counting my money and ready to go home and start spending it with her. So it was kind of one of those things where, I had that thing going on where that stereotype was not really me. And in the end, actually, my ex-wife now actually was the one that eventually ended up cheating on me. But the thing is I pushed that back and went blame, 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 pointing my finger at her for so many years. And I came to realize that, guess what? It wasn't all her fault. It was my fault too. And there was an element of, I wasn't the same person she married. Right. So that creativity was a big thing to do with that, where that dropped off, man, it was almost like it was almost like that. It was such a game changer for me that it really just took all the air out of our relationship. And
Mhm.
in the end, it just kind of fizzled out, and it was meant to be that way. It just was. And
Yeah.
now where I'm at, my creativity is on a whole other level. Like, it's not based off of just the exterior, whereas that's what my creativity was for all of my life.
Mhm.
Now it's all more so based on the interior and how
Mm.
I can make a difference by what I'm putting on paper, what I'm representing of the words coming out of my mouth. And words do have massive power. So when it
Mhm.
comes down to that, a lot of people don't realize how much those little words can impact a kid, or how much those little words can, and you know this, I'm sure, where it's like
Yeah.
all that kid stuff, right? Anybody in therapy obviously realizes that it all derives from those little T's, those little traumas that happened to you when you were a kid. And I have a
Mhm.
couple of them that are actually instrumental in holding me back from being the best version of myself I could be for a long, long time. And
Yeah.
now that I'm liberated from that through, again, introspection, I was
Mhm.
able to actually release those subconscious blocks and become
Mm.
a leader instead of being a follower all the bloody time. So yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like creativity liberated you again
Mhm.
in a sense and helped you feel more alive. And
Yeah.
what I'm hearing is like gave you a sense of your life back.
Yeah, and there was an element of acceptance that came into that
Mm.
territory too, right? Because like
Yeah.
for me, I was kind of a introvert when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, right? Like I was kind of the one that was always kind of mediocre and never wanted to be mediocre. I couldn't stand it. Like I just like ugh, I just don't want to be that, you know. I really strive
Mhm.
to be more, but I always had these roadblocks in the way. And I kind of found that my first, I guess you could say, dive into real creativity was the most disciplined thing I've ever done in my life.
Mm.
So when I was kind of at that point, you know, when you're at that point where you're a teenager and you're just trying to kind of fit in and you just
Yeah.
don't. And so I was that kid that didn't, that just kind of just, I wasn't the popular kid. I wasn't the one that was the whatever, the loser. I was kind of just in the middle, and I didn't really have a label, and just
Mhm.
kind of that one, you know. And so I didn't like being there. So I thought, you know, I want to do what I have control of. I'm gonna
Mm.
do use that to my advantage. So I started working out, right? Like I was
Mhm.
like, okay, I'm just gonna start working out. And then that turned into an obsession, and that turned into a whole other level of discipline that really is beyond what most people go to.
Yeah.
And that creative art form, in my eyes, at that time in my life, was the most, I guess you could say, almost the perfect creative art form, is perfecting and sculpting your own body to the best that it can
Mhm.
possibly be. And that started off my whole obsession with perfectionism, which was probably the most detrimental thing that I could have possibly
Yeah.
done. But I did. And that perfectionism brought me to places that, like I said, like, it's like, yes, I went on stage, I became a bodybuilder. I went through the whole phase of bulking for like 5 years of training, and then dieting down with obsessive diets and losing
Mhm.
40 pounds in 10 weeks and all that craziness that comes with that territory. And with a realization that I couldn't sustain that if I wanted to
Mhm.
actually have a quality of life into my older years. So I leveraged that I created, and went on to the stage and started taking my clothes off for a living. And
Mhm.
quite frankly, I wasn't even, between you and me, I wasn't even that good of a dancer. I only had about 5 moves over
Yeah.
25 years, but I just kept being creative with my shows, you know? So I kind of just got away with the body and just thought, oh,
The
okay, well,
secrets come out.
right. Yeah.
I
Yeah. All my
love
dirty little revelations. So it's,
5 moves. I love it.
yeah, right. And just threw a different accent on it every time that I went out there, right? So it's
That's
but
perfect.
it was fun though, you know. And being, and that started bringing me into a different realm of it, where, you know, I think that for me, I love the buzz and the attraction and the
Mhm.
adrenaline rush of live performances. And people that do live theater can really relate to this. Like
Yeah.
I've never done live theater, but I've known a lot of friends of mine that have, and it's different. I've done TV, like I've been on different shows back in the day, and that's different because they're just
Yeah.
recording and it's just like, okay, take, you know. But when
Right.
it comes to live stuff, you screw up, you screw up. You know,
Yeah.
you hit a home run, you hit a home run, and it feels really good, right?
Yeah.
So
You get that immediate feedback in that live experience.
good or bad,
Yeah.
right? And so like, even like, I can tell you some funny stuff like that, right? Where it was kind of like, and I was mentioning this when we chatted a little bit earlier, where it was kind of like, I never wanted to be the guy that was doing the show that was the YMCA show. Cause like, you know, or the typical cop or the construction worker. I think the closest that I got to a show that was that stereotype was a cowboy act. And that was kind of the Billy the Kid, Young Guns kind of thing, right? So, and I still had mad creativity in that cowboy act. It wasn't just the typical, hey, you know, it was like, it was more than that. And that's what that show actually was the one that won me all my contests. So, but it's funny because I've gone above and beyond that, where I've been too creative and actually done things that were so out of the ordinary that it was like, oh, that was weird. That didn't work. You know, and then that's a real bummer when you're standing out there, you're like thinking that it's gonna go off and everybody's looking at you like, okay, like what were you thinking of when you did that?
Right. You missed that sweet spot of creativity.
Yeah, and then you're standing there and you're like, oh god, and I gotta finish this now. Like, oh, you know, you're 5 minutes in, you got another 15 on the stage, and you're just going, no. So yeah, but no, it's an interesting business that I was in for a long time, and I miss it. I miss the adrenaline rush of being out on the stage, but it's different now. It's just different, and being the real me, not the alter ego, that's a different level of creativity. And I get a lot more gratification out of that, if you want to know the honest truth. I really do. I get a lot more gratification out of it.
I love that. I think that is so important. And so much of creativity is really finding our authenticity and what aspects of creativity really fuel us and feed our soul so that we can show up in that creative space again. I'm super curious. What's your earliest memory of being creative?
Okay, well, so I'll just backtrack a little bit because I have a very interesting uniqueness. It's not just being a male dancer, but I was one of those folks from the generation of being adopted to your grandparents. So for me, you know, it was more so in the 70s. Like I was born in 1970, so a lot of families really in that era, there was a lot of adoption to grandparents because it was I guess an era that in a lot of ways was a little bit more frowned upon for single moms and all that. So there was a little element of that where the grandparents were taking on the sacrifice of taking on the kid, right? So I was kind of that kid. And so, but my grandparents, like they were the best people. Like they're both passed away now, but they brought me up with so much morality and integrity, and they taught me so many great lessons. But quite frankly, they only had so many tools to work with. And as much as I would love to say that my dad was Superman and my mom was Superwoman, they weren't. That wasn't the reality of it. They didn't come with a manual, and neither did I. So when it came down to it, I really found that, unfortunately, especially with my grandfather, he was very Depression era. So unfortunately for him, and this is a little personal, but I say it now without holding back, but in his era, like his mother committed suicide in the Depression. And then he ended up in World War II in the Navy fighting in the North Atlantic, right? So what are you programmed to do when you're in the military? You're programmed to be a robot. You're programmed to not show emotion. You're just, it's just get in there and do what you need to do, right? So what did he do after he gets out of the war and all that and dealing with all those traumas as a kid? He holds all that, bottles all that emotion in, right? So it's like, and he doesn't show his family the same. He showed his love for his family just in a different way. We didn't have the I love yous. We didn't have the sweeties, the honeys and all that. It was non-existent. There was there was never even the physical contact between them. It was just like the kiss at their anniversary once a year sort of thing, right? It wasn't just, that was not my household. But boy, did I ever have a hunger for it. Like I was really hungry for that emotional connection, right? So for me, when you're talking about going back, like the funny thing is I really wanted the emotional connection so bad, Mari. This is what I used to do. Paint this picture. This is so funny. So we had this house, and I lived up here in Canada, and I was on the West Coast where I was born and raised, and we had an older house, and my folks used to sit out in the kitchen, and they'd have company over, and they'd be playing cribbage out in the kitchen and stuff, and just talking about the weather or whatever, you know, and all that stuff. And so, but as a kid, like, I didn't want to just stay in my room and, you know, I'd listen to Janis Joplin records or whatever when I was a kid, and, you know, I'd be in there messing around, but that only kind of went so far, right? And so like, I always wanted to get a rise of them. So they'd get company over, and I'd be standing there in my bedroom, and my bedroom was situated kind of beside where the kitchen was. And then when you go from my bedroom to the bathroom, there was like kind of a gap where you could see into the kitchen. So I would just strip down naked and I'd run back and forth between the bathroom and the bedroom, like in front of them, like naked as a jaybird with company over, so that they'd all just get a rise and everybody would start laughing and they'd be just like, oh, there goes Corey, you know, he's just having a good time. And I'd just sit in my room and just be like, just laughing, you know, thinking it was just the best, right? And it was like 5 years old or something doing this, right?
Yeah.
So like that was where I got that element of that adrenaline that I just felt from that, and I love that feeling, right? So I jokingly say when I'm talking about doing presentations and stuff, because I do strive to do that as part of public speaking goes, I want to talk about that story a little bit and kind of say, you know, at that point when my parents actually saw me do that, they realized I was going to be one of two things. It was either he was going to be a male exotic dancer, or he was going to be a pole vaulter. You know, so I mean, but you know, just self-deprecating stuff, right? Just throw it out there.
Sure. But you know, I think that there's an aspect of creativity in those early kid, like I'm gonna do whatever I can to get the attention that I want, or the rise, or there's that aspect. And for kids, there isn't that you know, filter. We don't have that filter
wide open.
We're gonna have fear. Fun. Exactly.
Fear is non-existent, right?
Well, it sounds like there's so much that has inspired you in your life, and particularly over the past couple of years. But in your world today, who or what inspires you?
Oh man, you know, it's really interesting because I look at it like I used to surround myself in the wrong environment, to be honest. And nothing bad on the people that I surrounded myself with. They were bad apples of good intent. And there were a lot of really good, loving people that are still really good, loving people that I care about. But I started surrounding myself, especially in this last couple of years, with people that I could learn from. And for me, not being cocky saying this in any way, I'm just saying this truth. There was times when I was unfortunately the smartest person in the room a few too many times. And when you're that person, you're not learning and growing. And if I'm not learning and growing, I'm not really living. And so like, to me, I had to put myself into a new environment. Being authentic was a huge component to that. And being truly authentic actually lost me a lot of those people that I wasn't growing around. And it gained me a lot of other people in my life that are growing and learning. So for me, it's not necessarily the superstar. Now, I will say there are some superstars in this world that I do look up to, living and dead, that I've learned a lot from. But mine is more so just by people that I truly connect eye to eye with, that I'm at, that are right in my life right this moment. People that have just come into my life that I'm learning from, and people that I've known for decades now that I'm inspired by. That I don't want to be them, but I just want to kind of, like, when I look in the mirror, I kind of want to throw my own accent onto it and kind of draft off their success, so to speak, right? So, you know, and when I admire something about somebody, when it comes to being a speaker or being a musician or being an actor or whatever it may be, I may not want to go in that direction, but I can sure learn from them. So, you know, and one person in particular actually is kind of, here if we go, and I'm really aging myself saying this, but there's one in particular, and I kind of look back, and I'm not trying to be too morbid here, but I do look back because my book has a lot to do with self-worth and lack, and the way you feel after everybody's gone and after you're off the stage, and who you are when you look in the mirror stuff, right? And one person in particular that I've always been kind of saddened by, and it was so tragic what happened with him at such a young age, and that happens with a lot of musicians and people, obviously, that are in the spotlight. But Michael Hutchence from INXS back in the 80s, how he passed away, it always dug into me and still does to this day, because I always looked at him as somebody that was kind of, we had a lot of, ironically, a kind of similarities in some ways, not the same industry, but I was a really charismatic entertainer. I had a lot of people that wanted a piece of me, men and women, you know, and just and just kind of, you're in that zone, and they all want you for the wrong reasons. And then when you get home, or you're at your hotel and you're alone, you know, and I always kind of felt for him, because in his last hours, he was reaching out to people all night on a phone in his hotel room, and ended up committing suicide because he just and supposedly, they don't know for sure, but it's just like, but that guy was like, man, you know, I would give one day to be in that guy's shoes back in the day when he was on top of the world with that group. You know, I would have loved to have been in that creative zone. That's a whole other zone that I've always looked up to and went, ooh, you know, I've never had that in me. but man, can I appreciate it, right? Like,
Yeah.
so my side was more using music and dancing to music. It wasn't so much
Sure.
creating music, but I
Yeah.
always had a love for that, right? So yeah.
Being inspired, your creativity being inspired by the music
Absolutely.
and the dance.
Yeah.
I think that's so great. I mean, yeah, it could be someone who has a big name or someone who has no name at all and still
Yeah.
experience that same creative explosion.
Great example. One of my best friends here in town, he wrote the foreword for my book. He's one of my, he inspires me. He's probably 10, 15 years younger than me. And him and his wife are incredibly creative people that went through major trauma in this last couple of years and just wrote a book about it and everything. And they're doing really well. But like, it's just like, again, like he may not be some superstar, but boy, I mean, every time I meet for coffee with him once a week, we're just like bouncing ideas back and forth. And it's like, oh yeah, that could work. And this could something we could do. And, you know, we can just timeline it out and we can make this happen in 6 months. And let's do a podcast and we'll name it this and, you know, blah, 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 blah. And we're just so in the zone. Right. And that's the people that I want to be around, that you're feeding off that energy, not the person that's sitting there whining and complaining about all the problems in the world that they can't fix. You know, I want to talk to me about some solutions. Don't talk to me about problems.
Having that community sounds like the community that supports your growth and you to thrive in a very different way than from previous life experience. Yeah.
But in the mix of all that previous life experience, man, like I'm serious. Like I had guys that I worked with that just sat back in awe sometimes of like, because when I would hit a home run show, it was like, and that creativity that I had back then usually came from pain. Like as crazy as that sounds, like the best show that I ever created in Florida when I was working with my group down there was literally it was called The Executive, and it was about a guy who had lost it all. And this is so funny, Mari. I actually used to, I spent probably $10 on this costume total. I went to the secondhand store and bought like the trashiest suit that I could possibly get and put a baseball hat on with a beard attached to it and some long hair. And I had a bottle in my hand with a paper bag around it. And I was playing like I was homeless, and the MC would turn around and say, "Oh yeah, ladies, we found this guy stumbling around half cut outside, and he convinced us to let him come in here and do a show for y'all. Do you want to give him a shot or what?" And they'd be like, "Woohoo," going nuts. And I'd stumble in and I'd have my bottle. I'd be like, and I'd, do my voiceover and stuff. And it was just funny because I would be like, I lost her and I lost my dog. I lost my house. I lost my car. I lost everything that I have. And all I have left is just this picture of her and this damn ring. And then I'd take the ring and I'd throw the ring on the floor, and I'd be sitting there looking at the picture, sitting on my park bench, all depressed and upset. Right. And then I'd go into this, Aerosmith, Don't Want to Miss a Thing. And there's just a whole build up and everything. And then I'd have this fire in this garbage can on the stage. It was presenting this street scene. And it was just one of these things where by the end of the song, when I was stripping out of it and all the rest of it, yes, it was all the glitz and glam of doing this fire show and oil and all that junk and everything else. But the last moment would always just bring the house down. And sometimes it would be cheers and sometimes it would be tears. Yeah. And it was actually, I'd take that picture and I'd throw the picture in the fire. And that was like the end of it. Like she was done. I was done with that. And that was like, and then it was just like the house would just come down. And it was like, but that was all from the heart of actually, believe it or not, having a breakup with somebody that really meant a lot to me. And going through a downward spiral at that time. And it was also a downward spiral of drug addiction as well at that time. So, and that drug that I was taking at that time was ecstasy, which brought out a lot of emotion that I didn't actually have in my life before I tried that. So when I went to Florida, I went from being a guy that took care of his body, that didn't do anything but drink a couple of beers. At 26 years old, I left Canada after hitting those titles that I won in contest. And I ended up going all the way across the US to Florida for a decade, leaving my family, leaving my friends, leaving everything that I had behind, walked into a new world of MTV and just basically all these stars and everything else around me. And I knew I was a VIP. I got in, didn't have to wait in line for anything, got into all the best shows. Like I was just in that zone of status, and it was just like free drugs. So it was kind of like, okay, what's this little pill going to do to me? Oh, nothing, right? Yeah, right. Next
Yep.
thing you know, this door opens up, and the door of
Mhm.
emotion and that door of creativity, I might add, opened up.
Mhm.
And some was really amazing and some was really shitty.
Yep. I believe it. I absolutely believe that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's quite the journey to go on and now step into a very new journey.
Oh
And
yeah.
I mean, from your experience,
Mhm.
how would you encourage others to find creativity in their life?
Got to get out of your comfort zone for once, and second off, you got to get out of your environment.
Okay.
Like I just believe that staying in the same town, drinking the same drink in the same bar in the same county that you're in is not going to get you creative, unless you're just going to try to be able to do maybe some book, I should say some scrapbooking or something, which is great. But if you're really wanting to get creative, you got to be able to actually experience other cultures. You got to be able to experience other environments to be able to understand what other people out there are doing in this world and the lens that they're seeing this world through. Because
Yeah.
not everybody, I'm not going to agree with everybody, and not everybody's going to like me, quite frankly, and that's okay. But
Yeah.
I can do the old Trent Shelton, which I love me some Trent, when he turns around and says, hey, I can disagree with you, but I can still respect your perspective. Because I don't live my life through your lens and vice versa. But I might, but if I completely disagree with you on something, I can most definitely figure out what's going on in that brain without having to get into an argument and just say respectfully, I'm not going to change your mind and you're not going to change mine, but please just shed some light on why you think that way so I can kind of understand you a little bit. That's a gray area instead of it all just being so black and white. You're wrong, I'm right. Like it's just so that way in this world now. And I'm trying my best actually in my own way to kind of create a little bit of a gray area, because I think that social media and just, I'm not going to sit here and slag social media all day because it does have its good points, but there's an element of it that's just so impersonal and it's just so like cut and dry. I even really literally do this before I even post to somebody something on social media, not just because Facebook's just like crazy with their computers, but just simply because I don't want to say something and have it taken out of context. So sometimes I'll just text it back to myself to see if it's actually something that, if I feel it, when I see those words, like, is that going to, make somebody else feel bad about what I'm saying? I don't want that to be said the wrong way. And
this has been a delightful chat about creativity and life and all of the things that come along with it. I just have one more question for you.
Shoot, I'm an open book.
What does it feel like in your body to be creative?
Oh man. Well, now it's different. Really, it's kind of strange, but my perfectionism was my creativity before was based off perfectionism. My creativity now is based off progression. And what I mean by that is I became very obsessed with yoga in this last couple of years, very obsessed. And although it's not necessarily as creative as maybe some what other people do, I kind of found that the progression of getting better at what I've been doing, whether it be holding poses or going into a stretch or whatever it is, has allowed me to be so centered that when I'm in a class, and especially when I'm zoning at the end of it and I'm just kind of in that Zen mode, I find that I get my best ideas there. And that means ideas for not only the book, but for what my future is. And my way of, I guess you could say, documenting that so I don't forget it. Here's a little tidbit for your listeners is, and if you're not doing this, guys, do this, okay? Even if and I know you're not supposed to do it when you're driving, but maybe get your passenger to do it. Keep your phone on you, keep your voice note on you. You get a great idea when you're driving or something, just hit it, voice note it, whatever it takes, just voice note it because you're going to forget it. It's like if you're, I can't tell you how many times that I've even been in a class and I've been sitting there going, oh my God, I got to remember this. Like, give me 5 minutes so I can get back in the change room to my phone so I can voice note this. Or like even in a shower, you're doing something mundane and you get this idea in your head. I jump out of the shower, I'm voice note. Or before you go into sleep at night, voice note. Like I'm just always voice noting all the time because I just feel like you got to do it because your brain only can hold so much, right? So remember that stuff when it's gold, mark it down and then do it. That's the thing, right? Like a lot of people sit there and they write notes all day when they're going to a seminar, but do you actually take action on those notes? Or do you just write them down because the guy told you to write them down?
Good reminder. Write them down and then do something.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. And if people want to learn more about your book and the other things that you're doing, how could they go about doing that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I'm going to throw you my shameless plug right now. So anyways,
please do.
No, it's really simple, you guys. I mean, really, when it comes down to it, my website is takeitoff.ca. I'm up here in Canada. So, and you can go to my site, you can chat with me on the site. You have any questions, if there's anybody that wants to book a podcast, for example, you can go on there on my Calendly link and just go ahead and book me for that. If you are interested in my book, it is being released 1 week from today, or I should say 1 week. This might be on afterwards, I should say, but it is January 18th when my book releases, but you can still pick up the book at takeitoff.ca at any time after that. And like I said, the book isn't necessarily, it does have some great stripper stories in it. I'm not going to deny it, but I mean but there is definitely a learning experience in there. And I really, truly, my thing is I just truly hope that my goal with this whole thing isn't necessarily all about just selling as many books as I can. What it comes down to is I was that guy that had a really heavy skewed definition of what man enough meant in the first place in my former life. And I couldn't shed tears, and I'd hold it all in, I'd bottle it all up. And I put this in the back of my book at the very end of it. And it's just let the dam break before you damn break. And that's kind of why I wrote this. I want to take some of those layers of weight off, right? Just like, let people know that, when it comes down to it, even a person like me, I've gone through struggles that are relatable, just like the person that delivers the garbage. It's the same thing. It's just in a different lens. That's all. So take it off. That's why I called it Take It Off. It's not,
I love it.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. It has been such a treat.
Oh, for me too. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.